All right, Fifth and Long fans, welcome back to the show. Patrick DeMarre here, Paul the Commish Kashack. We are 1 month away officially as of tonight's recording from the start of the 2024-25 NFL season. Finally, dude, I can't wait. And Paul and I are here for our division previews as well. We're starting with the AFC and NFC East tonight. We're also going to be covering some fantasy topics, mostly covering those that we are staying away from in drafts. You are Paul and I absolutely not drafting to this point in the fantasy football cycle. Paul, my man, what's up, brother? How you doing tonight?
Not bad, Patrick. Not bad. I'm looking forward to getting into this. We're starting to get more into the nitty gritty. I didn't realize we're just a month out from today, so it makes me even more excited as well. It's right around the corner, man.
Oh, yeah. I believe it's the Ravens and Chiefs on September 5th, if I'm not mistaken. That's pretty crazy that we're starting out with potentially an AFC championship like matchup on night one. And then on night two, we have Eagles and Packers in Brazil. So that could easily be the NFC conference title game as well. Potentially, maybe if the Niners slip away.
I forgot about that game.
Yeah, I was going over schedules for these teams that we're going to talk about today. Again, we're covering the AFC and NFC East divisions. And that game came up on my list as one of the bigger games for Philly this year. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, Friday night football. I'm stoked for it. It's certainly a little bit different and something that we will talk about a little bit more in depth later. Before we get to that, Paul, happy birthday, my friends. Happy day of birth. Feliz cumpleaños. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. It's the Commish's birthday today. I didn't even know until 20 minutes ago. None of our friends knew. We only found out because somehow one of our buddies in our main group chat brought it up and sort of posed the question to Paul, is it your birthday? And he let
I usually keep it low key under wraps. I'm not a huge birthday celebration guy, but yes, thank you nonetheless, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Any celebrations in order for you, either that have already occurred or that have yet to, that you'd like to share with us?
No, not yet. We'll probably get into some shenanigans this upcoming weekend. But today I'm just celebrating it by spending it with you here on Fifth and Long.
Well, I'm honored, my friend. I'm honored. Ladies and gentlemen, please, by all means, wish Paul a happy birthday. If you choose, you can reach out to him on Instagram at RealPaulK_Shack. I know it's a little unique, but he's a unique guy, and he deserves all the thanks and praise. Happy birthday again, Commish. Love that we can celebrate it together, as we should.
Appreciate it. It is special that we get to do an episode on my birthday, so I'm excited.
I almost forgot we're here to talk football. Getting lost in your birthday, but happy birthday again, my man. Make sure you celebrate the Commish. Send him a nice message for us. Speaking of football, though, DeAndre Hopkins, Tennessee Titans wide receiver, slated to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a knee sprain. He could be ready for week 1, but for an aging superstar, this isn't really a great omen. It's not a great omen either for the Titans, who have really invested in their team in the offseason. They've added some additional pieces in that wide receiver room as well. We've talked a lot about Will Levis. Paul, I know you're a huge fan, and when I shared this news with you, it didn't seem like you were too stoked about it.
I mean, no, you're not. You never want to be happy about somebody missing time due to injury. But I am higher on the Titans, I think, in general, not just Will Levis. I think that this team, while they do still have some warts, and I think that there's a pretty big hill to climb for them, they could be a team that could be like a real dark horse. I'm not saying that they're going to make a huge deep run or anything, but if you're sitting there, post Thanksgiving going into Christmas, and you see them on the right side of that playoff picture, in that in the hunt category in the final couple weeks of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Tennessee Titans name there within striking distance of a playoff. DeAndre Hopkins, I think it was undeniable. It wasn't exactly a secret last year. He was a mentor to Will Levis. He was a steadying force for him. And while Levis certainly made his fair share of mistakes, we all remember that first game for Levis where he threw, I think, 4 touchdowns or 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was either 3 or 4.
Yeah, had monster day, I think over 300 yards as well. And it was all to DeAndre Hopkins, if you guys remember. That was the big target for Levis last year. Now, I know he's going to get Calvin Ridley, but I still think Hopkins is the guy that Levis wanted to and still wants to lean on in this Titans offense. So we'll see if it's more on the 4 side of this 4 to 6 week timetable or more on the longer 6 week time frame. Point is, I don't see Tennessee being a threat or like they need everything to go their way, I think, for them to kind of get into that playoff picture. And this is not the definition of going your way. Hopkins needs to miss minimal time, and when he comes back, you need to hope that he is at full strength, because I think Levis, he can't just rely on one guy. Defenses will pick that apart.
Yeah, it's certainly not a hot start by any means. Next on our list, judge overturns verdict in NFL Sunday ticket lawsuit, sides with the league instead. This is, again, some not so great news to start the pod with. U.S. District Judge Philip Gutierrez, who presided over the case, said Wednesday that the jury did not follow his instructions in determining damages per the Associated Press. This is a direct quote from an article from The Athletic covering the story. Gutierrez had previously said that damages cannot be based on guesswork or speculation, and plaintiffs must prove the reasonableness of each of the assumptions upon which the damages calculation is based. So it kind of seems like, and I'm not a lawyer, law students or lawyers, let us explain this to us, because I don't fully grasp it. But from my understanding, it seems like the side, the plaintiffs or the people that were filing against the NFL, which again could be totally wrong, not a lawyer. The people filing against
plaintiff is right in that otherwise they'd be the defendant. So yeah, you're good.
Lawyering for Dummies by Pat and Paul, new podcast starting soon. Anyways, essentially the side that was filing against the NFL, it seems like, miscalculated the amount of money in which the NFL should be giving back to Sunday ticket purchasers. And that's why the case didn't end up going through. I could be wrong again. They still broke antitrust laws. That is definitely still part of it. It seems like it's the other side of it that wasn't fully correct. So sorry, guys, you won't end up getting that return in the mail from the NFL after all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and try to speculate or tell you that I understand the blurb that you read just a minute ago or so. I was once considering going into law school as a profession, but I declined, ended up doing something different. So not a lawyer myself, but I was taken aback a couple weeks back when we talked about this. It's like you could be entitled to up to like a couple $1,000s if you've purchased Sunday ticket recently. That didn't really sit right with me. I was like, okay, cool. I definitely have purchased Sunday ticket within the past couple of years. Maybe I qualify for this, but I mean, it's not like I was robbed of a couple $1,000s. You know what I'm saying? It's Sunday ticket, I think, only cost me like 60 or 70 bucks in the end. So I don't really see how a settlement could pay out like $1,000 or something per person. So maybe the legal system is catching up to that. But again, I'm kind of in the same boat with you, Patrick. I don't know exactly what's going on here. Sounds like I'm not getting paid any money, and it sounds like I'm off the hook, and I'm not going to owe the podcast Sunday ticket like I previously promised a couple weeks back. So I apologize for that.
Hey, you and I can still go in 50-50 on it if you want. It's not too late. It's not too late. Tyreek Hill named the number one player in the league by the NFL's top 100 list. I'm assuming if you're listening to the show, you're probably familiar with the NFL top 100 list. Tyreek Hill also received a contract restructure from the Dolphins that made him the highest guaranteed money receiving receiver in the league. So no other receiver earns more money and is guaranteed to earn that money than Tyreek Hill. That's the stipulation there.
Not too surprised that he ended up as number one overall player in the league. I think that you could have easily given that to Christian McCaffrey as well, and nobody would have really squawked. CeeDee Lamb might have had a case for it as well this year. I think all of those guys completely worthy of it. But, I mean, Tyreek Hill is on a different planet. I mean, they call him the cheetah for a reason. And, I've talked down about his quarterback, but I think that the reason that his quarterback is getting or got the extension that he did just a couple days ago, I think that that's directly linked to how good Tyreek Hill is. I think that he makes the people on the offense around him better. And there's not many people that you can say non-quarterback wise in the NFL that make other people better to the degree that Tyreek Hill does. So very deserving here, had a historic season, might have gotten 2,000 yards had he not. I think he missed a game towards the end of the year. Might not carry quite the same weight now in the 17-game season, but just the fact that you're in that discussion speaks volumes about how talented you are. So credit to him. Nothing much else to say about that than just a big congratulations.
To me, I was the most interested in the timing of it. Like the top 100 list, the contract restructure pretty much happens, right after the other, more or less. It almost seemed like, in a weird way, he was rewarded for it. I don't think they really had anything to do with each other, to be honest. But
yeah, I think it's coincidence.
Yeah, but the timing of it was still kind of funny. Back to back, having the public kind of social recognition as being the best guy, and then also getting the guaranteed money side of that as well. Just kind of piqued my interest. That's all.
I certainly don't think that him being the number one player in the top 100 like motivated the Dolphins to restructure this deal. But what I could have seen happen is that the Dolphins maybe have had this plan in place for a while, and they're like, hey, you're going to be released as the number one player in the top 100, in a couple weeks, month, whatever it is. Let's release this news about the deal right around the same time. And they just kind of did that for like a caveat or a bonus for Tyreek Hill. I could have seen something like that happening, but yeah, the restructuring the deal was probably honestly, as much as anything, that was motivated by Tua's deal more so than Tyreek Hill being on the top 100.
Totally agree. And we covered Tua's deal in the last episode as well. We covered a little bit of him, a little bit of Jordan Love, some other fantasy football stuff. We got plenty more good things for y'all on the way. Next, in recent news, Harrison Butker given a 4-year extension from the Kansas City Chiefs, making him the highest paid kicker in the league. He's going to be earning nearly $18 million guaranteed year after year. He's also been in the press recently for some public comments that some received pretty poorly.
I was wondering if you were going to bring those up.
I'm not here to talk about that. We're just here to talk about the contract extension. That's it. He has been one of the best kickers in the league over the last couple of years. Pretty reliable for the Chiefs. He's made some big kicks for them. There's no reason why they wouldn't have extended this guy by any means.
Yeah. I mean, you are right. I agree. Let's put some public comments that he may or may not have said at a commencement speech aside. This guy's nails, and he's a big reason why the Chiefs. Let's not beat around the bush. Patrick Mahomes, but go back to that game, the 13-second game against Buffalo in that battle on the conference championship, I believe it was. Yep. A lot of people forget is that the Bills played soft defense and soft coverage with 13 seconds left, and it allowed the Chiefs to get into field goal range, but it's not normal field goal range for most kickers. I believe Butker, it was a 58-yarder that he needed to nail just to send that thing to overtime. So, I mean, that's the kind of leg that this guy has. And that actually might have been in the divisional round. I think that was the year they lost to Cincinnati. But
I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, regardless, I mean, that's the kind of kicker that he is. I mean, he's a Justin Tucker-esque guy where you can get the ball across the other team's 40 and all of a sudden you're in scoring range. And you can't say that for every kicker in the league. So 4 years, $18 million with how big the cap is and some of the contracts we've talked about lately. For somebody as valuable as a guy like Harrison Butker and as crucial as he is, I mean, a guy that can rack up points, I think it's well worth it, and believe me, that's coming from a guy in myself where I rarely say contracts are worth it for the players. So congrats to Harrison Butker on that. He is very good at his craft.
Special teams wins games and can lose you games. Another thing we'll talk about later in this episode. Puka Nacua listed as week to week by the Los Angeles Rams with a knee injury at camp. There were pictures of Nacua wearing a bag of ice essentially over that knee as well. I don't remember if it was the left or the right. Nacua was obviously a phenomenal player for the Rams last year. Set a new rookie high in receiving yards, I believe it was, as well as maybe some other categories too. If he's not there, the messages about Cooper Kupp have been great through camp, saying that he is now fully healthy and that he could maybe be a fantastic contributor for the Rams this year. But they've already had some injuries in other areas of their team, specifically O-line at this point of the season. And there was an article on The Athletic that I read recently where McVay was sort of talking about how it's nice to get, those backups some reps and see where those guys stand. But at the same time, you want to be using your number ones right now and seeing what they can do together, making sure that camaraderie is built. These guys aren't really going to play a lot in the actual preseason games themselves. This is their time to work on what they're going to be using in the actual games in the regular season. So I don't think this is going to be a serious thing for Nacua. Hopefully it's not, but it wasn't really disclosed what the actual knee injury itself was. Hopefully it's nothing major or nothing that carries over into the season itself.
Yeah, teams don't really have to. I think, especially at this point in the season, they don't really have to disclose like nitty gritty details of the injury. For him, I would say, yeah, week to week is probably at this point in preseason a good news to hear. You hear week to week, and like you hear that on August 5th, you should be telling yourself with a month to go, I think that I'll be back if you're Puka Nacua. So the Rams, yeah, they got to get healthy, but I mean, you pointed it out, Cooper Kupp, he's capable. I mean, let's not forget how good that he has been. I know he was injury plagued last season. Like they have other guys that can fill in. It was an injury to Cooper Kupp that gave Puka Nacua his shot last year. So we'll see. Maybe it's somebody beyond Cooper Kupp that can step up as well. But obviously, as a fantasy manager, I'm somebody who wants to draft Puka Nacua in multiple leagues this year. Get healthy, brother.
Tutu Atwell record season incoming, maybe.
I don't know about record season, but
Tutu
I don't know.
Atwell,
Tutu,
baby.
he stepped up in a couple weeks, like here or there last year, where he had some decent performances.
He won me at least one fantasy game last year. I think multiple across a few different leagues, actually, not just one. Love Tutu Atwell. Love me some Tutu. Next on our list, this is something we've kind of talked about a little bit in previous episodes as well. We're no strangers to the subject. 49ers are now actively discussing potential Brandon Aiyuk trades. Last time we sort of visited this situation, it seemed like the Niners were less inclined to actually trade him away. And I think you and I were both sort of the belief that unless they can get a ridiculous haul for them, they should keep this guy around. But rumors have been circulating about what kind of money he's wanting. And the reality of the situation, I think, is starting to set in for the Niners. And they have been exploring some things. There was a rumored deal with the Steelers that were circling around the internet today that ended up being false. I got bit by it. I bit the hook on it, unfortunately, but didn't end up publicizing it.
I hear it's still
really.
live. Like,
I think there's legitimately something maybe
the
being
talks
worked
are
on.
legitimate.
Yeah. And I don't think it's with just Pittsburgh either. I've heard the Patriots are in it. I've heard the Commanders are in it. And I think I've heard there's one other team involved as well. That's like a mystery team, sort of. So I'd be interested to see what teams are really willing to part ways with in order to acquire the services of Brandon Aiyuk. I've made the argument a few times on the show. I think he's fully capable of being a top 10 receiver in the league. And there were times last year where I thought he was already with the kind of production he had. And, you know, a lot of Shanahan's offense isn't really built on those deep bombs that Aiyuk specializes in, but his overall route tree is phenomenal. There's just so many talented guys in that offense. He's not relied upon to have the brunt of the work. Really, it's McCaffrey and Debo in the running game. Let Kittle get the ball and get some rack, but Aiyuk has really stepped up his game the last couple of years, and certainly there's a couple shiny destinations potentially for him.
Yeah, I believe second in the league in yards per catch last year, only to George Pickens. So, I mean, it'd be pretty cool if the Steelers had the top two guys in YPC on their team. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that the Niners themselves obviously are still like real players to retain him there. It's about how much they kind of want to spend, obviously, on that contract. Like, that's the driving force of everything. How much are you willing to spend on this guy? And if you're not the 49ers, you got to know that some draft capital is going to come along with it, which complicates things there for a potential trade. So yeah, don't be duped, but I have to imagine we're going to get some sort of confirmation on this soon. I would think, I mean, you know, we're in the throes of training camp right now. We had a preseason game last week. We've got most teams playing their first preseason game this upcoming weekend. I mean, I don't know how much longer this can go before somebody making a definitive move, whether it be a Steelers or a Patriots, or whether the 49ers throw a number at him that Brandon Aiyuk, an offer that he can't refuse. Sorry, I just watched The Godfather last night, so I'm a little bit in Godfather mode. But whatever it may be, I mean, I think that with all these rumors swirling and that really picking up steam this Monday afternoon, I think that we're going to get concrete news within the next couple of days. I do. So like by the time you're listening to this podcast, you might know what team Brandon Aiyuk is on. I think that like we're finally tracking towards an answer on that. Crazy as it's been, this saga has just gone on all summer.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I would not be surprised at all if there was something official that came out in the next like 72 hours or so from.
Yeah, that's a pretty good time frame.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. You know, there's some more preseason games that have to happen this weekend and stuff. The thing about it is, you guys didn't really acquire much back in the Deontay Johnson trade. I believe you got a cornerback out of it, a player.
Yeah.
There was a pick swap for the previous draft that we just had. But I remember when that move happened, you were pissed. You were like, "Oh, we're tanking. Like we don't really care about winning if we're making this trade."
Yeah, I thought that we should have gotten better value. I mean, I thought that you could have. I honestly, it seemed kind of like a throwaway, just like we weren't interested to keep Deontay Johnson, and I'm fine like giving Deontay Johnson up in principle. I think Deontay Johnson's a good player. I don't think he's like he's not an Aiyuk talent or he's not this game changer type of guy. But I would have liked to do a pick swap and get like a slot corner. It's who Dante Jackson kind of profiles to be, the guy that we got from Carolina. I mean, if you were heading in the direction of like how much better would I feel about their offense with Aiyuk, of course, like me acquiring Brandon Aiyuk, the thing that I worry about is what the package that we do to give up, package that we give up to get him. It's not about how the offense would look if he gets there. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm the pessimistic Steeler fan, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Steelers would be a worse football team with Brandon Aiyuk. It'd be cool to have that. That would be really the final completion of that Steeler offense. I mean, they've got a decent running back duo. They brought in 2 different quarterbacks this year. They used a lot of draft capital in the first and second round on their offensive line. So, like, that's the last piece of the puzzle is another receiver opposite George Pickens.
Well, I think, like, hindsight is 20/20, but if you can turn Deontay Johnson into Dante Jackson, who could be a starting quarterback for you guys and pretty productive at that, and then on the flip side, add Brandon Aiyuk as well and actually upgrade at that wide receiver position, it's a 1-2 punch of moves where if both pay off, really it looks like the Steelers are winning the offseason is what I'm trying to say. I think again to the Patrick Queen move that we talked about a few weeks back as well. I'm getting higher and higher on your Steelers, and we're going to cover the AFC and NFC North, I think, in our next series of divisions. So I'm definitely excited to talk some Pittsburgh football with you then, my man.
Yeah, man. I think that they've done a solid job in the offseason already. I think that, like I said, there are still some holes, but yeah, you bring in Aiyuk. I mean, it's a resounding like positive. Obviously, you can't beat around the bush. You can be as pessimistic as I am, and you got to at least tip your cap to them. They're putting pieces in play. It's about actually executing and winning some damn playoff games.
I can't agree more, my man. Could not agree more, especially coming from a fan of the New England Patriots, greatest franchise in NFL history. You know, all this and that. We're not going to get into it and get into fighting words now.
Off screen we will. Don't worry.
Off screen for sure. Yeah. All right, we got to move on now. It's time. No reason to dilly dally anymore. The AFC East is the division we're going to start with, going over team previews, division previews, and the way that Paul and I are going to structure this is essentially in this format. We'll talk a little bit about what the team did last season, how the team changed during the offseason, what their strengths and weaknesses could be in 2024. We'll also talk a little bit about their goals for this season, realistic goals. So that might not necessarily mean making it to the playoffs. It might be more development related for certain teams. It might be personnel related, like really just knowing what these teams are working with in terms of rookies and other new facets of their team. There's a lot of different ways that conversation could go. We'll talk about the ceiling and floor of each team, and then we're going to do our best to predict the actual records of these teams, division winners. We'll give you a best fantasy value player for the division as a whole. So that's one guy from all of these 4 teams. And then we'll give you one bold prediction as well to finish. Paul, my man, we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills. No better place. Josh Allen, the stud, of course, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Buffalo last year finished the season on a bit of a high note. They were 11-6. They won the AFC East and unfortunately fell to the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round, 27-24 final score in that game. It was a great one. And ultimately, once again, their season ends with Josh Allen being bested by Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. It's like some sick version of Groundhog Day in Buffalo with this storyline at this point. Paul, the Bills struggled early in the year, but when their 5 last games of the season to secure the division title, we spoke about it back in November or December, where we talked about the mountain they would have to climb to make that happen, and they went and did it. They suffered multiple injuries on defense down the stretch, which definitely affected them in that game, and I think affected some of their decisions in terms of players in the offseason as well. And Josh Allen, despite having an MVP caliber season and some really fantastic performances, also led the league in turnovers and was a bit of a headache at times. So much so that the Bills in the middle of the season moved on from their offensive coordinator. They brought in Joe Brady as OC instead, promoting him from within the staff. He's still there in Buffalo as well. They're going to ride that tandem this year. Paul, what's the biggest moment of 2023 that really jumps out to you? And what's the biggest change that you see in this team since then?
Well, there's a handful of moments that jump out to me about 2023. I remember really 3 in general. I know you said 1, but I'll go through them quick. I look at first half of the season Bills and how discombobulated they were, and it's the not getting the kick team out in time in that Monday night game against Denver, where they really squandered an opportunity against just a completely average to below average Denver Broncos team in that one. And poor coaching, I'm very critical of McDermott. So that was what they resembled or looked like in the first half of the season. Then I remember them going into Miami on the final week of the regular season. I believe it was the final game of the regular season, pulling that win off and securing the division title in the AFC East and getting home field. And then, of course, it's wide right again for the Buffalo Bills. Another missed field goal, another small little miscue. It goes awry in the game against the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round. And it's just, I don't know. The Bills are talented. Josh Allen's super talented. I think, obviously, he's a very good quarterback. The Bills are a good team. I believe they will be again this year. But, man, this isn't just once or twice that they've been bested by the Chiefs. It happens every year, whether they beat them in the regular season or not, because in the regular season, they've had a decent amount of success, but come crunch time in the playoffs, they just haven't gotten it done. And you wonder if they ever will, really. I mean, because, Mahomes and Allen, they're like the same age. Basically, their careers are going to be going on for the same period of time, you would imagine, unless there's crazy injury to one of those guys. So, outlook in 2024, I don't know if this was part of the question you asked, but I see 2024 goals here on the list. For them, the Bills, it can't really change. The Super Bowl has to be the goal. At the very least, beating Patrick Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl. Their ceiling is a Super Bowl caliber team. I believe that. I believe when you have a quarterback in Josh Allen, that should be your ceiling every year. But we've found them just kind of performing at their floor, which I think is 10, 11 wins, somewhere between a divisional playoff team and a wild card team. And I think that they'll probably fall into the latter for this season again.
Their over-under for this season is 10.5. So you saying 10, 11 wins is pretty much right on the money per Vegas.
Yep.
You mentioned the loss against Denver. Remember, they also had an opening night loss to the Jets in the game in which Aaron Rodgers was injured and missed the rest of the season. They lost that game 22-16 in overtime. They lost to my New England Patriots on a Mac Jones game-winning drive at the end of the game. And they lost to Denver. They lost to three teams in the bottom third in the league.
There.
Yeah, if you avoid just one of those, you avoid Kansas City in the playoffs for at least a round, right? Really, it would only be one round because divisional, the championship game. But those are games you can't really afford to miss in 2024. And I look at their schedule for this year. I mean, it's pretty manageable. They have some tough games in there, but it's the Bills, man. Like what you were saying, you have Josh Allen. You have one of these guys that's one of the highest level quarterbacks in the league. You have to be able to take advantage of that. Now, in doing that, it's pretty interesting at the same time to move off of Stephon Diggs, to let Gabe Davis walk, to let some veterans from the defense walk in Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Leonard Floyd. You could throw Mitch Morse in there as well. But there were some additions to the team. Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdes-Scantling in the wide receiver room. Those are a couple of vets. They're newcomers. Keon Coleman, the rookie, out of FSU. Pardon me. Certainly a guy that has a lot of expectations on his shoulder. And then there was a couple of defensive guys as well. Cole Bishop, a rookie out of Utah that a lot of people are big fans of. I believe he's dealing with an injury currently, but may come back before the season starts. However, even then, like you're relying on a rookie as a safety, and your other safety that you have back there is pretty undisciplined as well. Nicholas Morrow, Mike Edwards joined the group too. I feel like what you said about the potential ceiling and floor of this team is really poignant because, like, it sort of seems like the Bills are trying to do a copycat maneuver of the Chiefs, where they sell high essentially on wide receivers, say we can do it without those guys, and we'll figure out a different way to beat you. But when I think about the Chiefs doing that last year, they had Travis Kelce, a guy they could rely on big downs in big games. The Bills don't really have a clear-cut guy to do that at face value. They may have someone who reveals themselves over the course of the year, but it's a little unclear. The Chiefs also had one of, if not the best defenses in the National Football League. I don't think the Bills are going to have one of the best defenses in the league next year. They might be like sort of middle of the pack if things really work out, but again, there's a gap there. And then the Chiefs also have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And obviously there is a gap between those two and Josh Allen and Sean McDermott. We've seen it year after year. Like, in my mind, just looking at the Bills at face value, they got worse in the offseason unless somebody really proves themselves. Curtis Samuel did have an 1,000-yard season with Joe Brady as the OC in Carolina. That was probably his most productive season of his career as like almost like a Debo Samuel type player. Like I know they have the same last name, but really that was pretty much what that play style sort of looked like for him in Charlotte. And then Keon Coleman probably has more pressure on his shoulders as a rookie wide receiver than anybody except for who? Malik Neighbors? Jalen Polk?
Maybe.
He's in the top 3.
Yeah. I agree. And I agree with your sentiment. I certainly don't think that this team got better in the offseason. I think one of the names that you left out in terms of on the defensive side of the ball that's no longer with them, I believe you forgot to mention Micah Hyde as well. I'm a little bit worried about what the secondary looks like. You've had for the past couple of years, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde anchoring that defense there at the safety positions, really helping with over the top throws. And that's not going to quite be there this year. The pass rush should still be there. You still have Rousseau and you still have AJ Epinesa, and the captain of the defense, Matt Milano, should be back.
They lost Leonard Floyd. He was their leading edge rusher last year and most sacks on the team. They brought back everybody else, but that's a big loss too.
Yeah, so you hope that the depth steps up, but Milano being back should be huge for them. He was missed the majority of the season last year, I believe ACL, but I could be mistaken. So you hope for some internal improvement and just things to look better there. But I do worry about what they look like on defense. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't think that this is going to be an elite defense. It could still certainly be good, but it's not going to be at the level that the Kansas City Chiefs were at last year. On the offensive side of things, you definitely make a great point. Keon Coleman's a guy I'm turning to. I'm looking at him in fantasy this year, and I'm looking at him just as an NFL spectator. Like, I think that the Bills are going to need him to really step in to a high leverage role if they're going to be solid on offense. But I think, honestly, where this team will start and finish will be the running game. James Cook, they were much better. And when they went on that tear at the end of the year last year is because they were running the ball so heavily. In fact, you were quick to comment on that, Patrick, that it wasn't necessarily Josh Allen winning games down the stretch. It was really James Cook. They were giving him 20, 25 carries a game, and it was like 160, 180-yard games. Yeah. I think, honestly, for the first true time, really, since Josh Allen has come into his own, I think that this will be a run-first team. I think that they will run first, and Allen will, I guess, have less taken off of his or more taken off of his shoulders in that regard. It's tough because I think that their two best receivers this year are going to be Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid, and they have a combined 1 year of NFL experience between the two. So I think because of that, and because it's not a very experienced and deep receiving core, you're going to have to rely on that run game that proved to be very effective last year. And I think that's the recipe for success on offense. And I worry a little bit about what their defense looks like. Those are the two biggest things I say that would be different, that I would be question marks as you look from the 2023 Bills to what they are now this year upcoming in 2024.
I've got 2 or 3 comments on exactly what you just mentioned with the run game. You took the words right out of my mouth. In my preview synopsis of the team for this year, I said that potential curveball for this team offensively would be if they decided to lean more into that aspect of their offense. When they made the switch to Joe Brady as offensive coordinator last year, the biggest change came in their play calling. They totally switched how they operated between the 50-yard line and the opponent's 35, switching from less big shot pass attempts and second and long to more runs, handing the ball off to James Cook, giving Josh Allen more third and manageables to work with so that A, he would be taking less shots on third down that result in turnovers, and B, get a more efficient offense. Get the ball down the field. I know Tyler Bass missed a field goal to end the season, but he made plenty of them before then. And another thing, Josh Allen is one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. You can make an argument that if you take out the inflation of Jalen Hurts' running touchdowns from the tush push, Allen might be the best running quarterback in the league. Lamar is certainly up there as well. He's in that conversation, but they're very different body types. Another guy, Ray Davis, rookie out of Kentucky, bowling ball running back, great between the tackles guy. We have not really seen him use that skill set to the best effect yet to this point in camp, because you really don't get that unless it's like real game speed with the pads on and everything and there's full contact. So he's going to kind of reveal what he can do as the games come. But I think, to me, like, the 2 guys on this team that have the most fantasy value, I think there's something to be said for Khalil Shakir if he can really flourish as Josh Allen's most dynamic and most reliable target. I just don't necessarily know. I feel confident in saying that, despite how much I appreciate his fantasy football.
This podcast
services.
loves Khalil Shakir. That is an undeniable fact.
Yeah, but I think Curtis Samuel and James Cook both have great value for this team fantasy-wise. I think that Samuel will get a lot of touches on the football in different ways. Cook, I think, is definitely going to be the bell cow, and I think that if you look at his game logs, first half of the season to the second half of the season, there is a difference. You can notice there's a little more attention the second half of the year to Cook getting as many touches as possible. And, you know, he's not going to balloon up to numbers like 30 touches per game or anything. They'll probably keep him like 20 to 25. But just giving him 10 more touches than he had in the first half of the season of games last year is going to be a big difference, I think, for this team. Any comments? Anything you want to finish up on for the
last thing I'll say? There were different points in the season where James Cook had a little bit of problems holding on to the football. He had a little bit of a fumbling problem last year. And I would say with as big of a workload as we are expecting him to have this year, he has got to hold on to the ball.
I'm just pointing out to the camera. I told you beforehand, this is not an alcoholic beverage. This is sparkling water.
Hey, say so, Patrick. Whatever you say.
I promise. Trader Joe's did me well. Although the parking lot was an absolute mess the other day. We have a tropical storm coming into town, and sorority recruitment starts this week in our college town. So everybody was at the grocery store. I still have PTSD from that. Anyways, finishing up on the Bills. My ceiling for Buffalo is 12-5 with an AFC title appearance. If I had to put a confidence meter at that, I would say like 25%. I think it's possible because they've got Josh Allen there, but I wouldn't say it's likely. Their floor, 8-9, missed the playoffs. Maybe they're a fringe wildcard team. Personally, I even though I put this as their floor, I still find it kind of hard to believe that they would turn into a losing team. I do think that Allen is talented enough, and that, as much as it pains me to say it, McDermott is a good enough coach to where they won't have a losing record. I think I remember seeing some stat that over the last 3 years or something, they have had the longest stretch of a certain scoring margin of games where they don't lose by a certain amount of points. I think it was either 1 or 2 possessions. I don't remember how much it is. So this part of our Bills dialogue isn't going to come across great to some folks, but they don't really get blown out. Like, they're always in games. And as long as they're within striking distance of teams, there's always the chance that there's some kind of magic that Josh Allen can pull out of his hat, and the Bills end up winning more games than you thought. So he's the real wild card with this team. He's obviously the X factor. I overall went for a 10-7 finish in their record, but I think if there's any significant injury to a main contributor on offense, or if there's multiple injuries on the defense, this could get real interesting real fast.
I got him as 11-6 would be my final record. I already gave my ceiling and floor predictions earlier. I do see him as a playoff team. I expect them to win the AFC East again. I will like arbitrarily pick them as long as they have Josh Allen. I think that's the way to go. So yeah, it'll be interesting. You make a fair point about, I know what you're talking about or what you're alluding to in terms of their point differential. I think they had one of the best point differentials in the league. And it's because you're right. They don't get blown out. They sometimes lose some games they shouldn't, but they're not getting blown out in them. And when they beat teams, sometimes they can beat them into the ground, into submission by multiple touchdowns. So they're an analytical darling in that regard. It all just comes down to, can you beat the boogeyman and the Kansas City Chiefs, because really nothing else matters for Buffalo except that.
So they do have, scheduling wise, one thing working in their favor. They finished the year with games against the Patriots twice, with a game against the Jets sandwiched between. So there is a potential that maybe if things don't go well in the Meadowlands, they can stack 2-3 wins at the end of the year and maybe squeeze into the playoffs. I had their toughest games of the season as week 2 at Miami on Thursday Night Football. You know, playing in Miami, warm weather that time of year, things get a little weird. The Dolphins are always hot early in the season as well. Not just the weather in Miami, the team's hot too. I have a game against the Ravens in Baltimore on Sunday Night Football at the end of September. The week after that, they travel to Houston for a game against another potential playoff team. And then they have 2 weeks between games against the Chiefs at home in mid-November and the Niners at home on Sunday Night Football the first day of December. So maybe it works in their favor. They end up playing Kansas City and San Fran at home. That San Fran-Buffalo game certainly is interesting to me just because I don't remember how many times I've seen the Niners travel that far across the country and like also north. I don't remember the last time I saw the Niners play in Buffalo. So that could be a really fun game down the stretch if Buffalo does end up still being a really competitive team. Next up, Miami Dolphins. We sort of joked about this last week. Tua saying, "Swim, Dolphins, swim." Or Dolphins country, let's swim, whatever it was. Being like the Russ Wilson counterpart. Miami Dolphins have an over-under of 9.5 games this year. Last year, they finished 11-6, second in the AFC East, had an AFC wildcard appearance, but stop me if you heard this before, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs at home in the playoffs. Not at home, on the road. My apologies. The Dolphins struggled down the stretch of the season as well. They finished the year 2-4, including the wild card loss. They had awful injury luck on both sides of the year ball, really throughout the year. Devon Achane missed a good chunk of the first part of the season. Mostert missed a handful of games. Jalen Ramsey was out for the first half of the season. Then towards the end of the year, they used Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips and some other contributors as well. It kind of snowball affected last year, and things got worse and worse in Miami. And then you go on the road to Kansas City, you play in the Ice Bowl, and you lose. Sour taste in the mouth after having a year in which you dropped 70 on the Broncos. I think after that, everybody was crowning Miami future Super Bowl champs. And instead, they're still trying to win their first playoff games in, a quarter century. Will they do it this year? Kind of seems like that's the goal. I don't know if it's necessarily a Super Bowl yet. I feel like there's multiple humps in that journey, so to speak. And you got to get over one before you can get over the rest of them, unless you really just raise some kind of monster with your team. Paul, my man, from 2023 to 2024, in your mind, what needs to change the most for the Dolphins?
I think Tua needs to be more of a catalyst. I know he led the league in passing last year, but I think that he needs to be making more plays himself rather than just relying on the guys around him like a Waddle or a Tyreek. So whether that be, getting the third and the fourth receivers involved more, whatever that is. I think that the Dolphins need to be better on defense, obviously, and that's going to be very difficult to do because their two edge rushers are going to be hobbled to start the year, and Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. That was a big reason why the Dolphins collapsed down the stretch. It's a good secondary that they have. They brought in Jordan Poyer, at one guy that we talked about that left Buffalo just a couple
Kendall
minutes
Fuller,
ago when
too.
we mentioned that. Still Fuller, yep, and you still have Jalen Ramsey. So it's a good secondary, but I worry about the pass rush here, and I worry about quarterbacks having all day to sit back in the pocket and pick them apart. I mean, because eventually some receiver will fly open. So I worry about the defense, and I always still worry about the quarterback. Is he capable of making the play when things break down? I mean, is he going to find an option to go to when it's Tyreek and Waddle are not available? Maybe a guy's hurt and they're doubling one of the other guys. Can he make plays that break the, like, I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say, but like McDaniel has a very scripted and like a very good scheme that he has for the Dolphins. Can Tua make plays when things break down and when the scheme isn't working? You know what I'm saying? And not just relying on everything around him and he just being that last piece of the puzzle. It's about him being a catalyst, not just being a piece of this offense, you know? So if he can take that next step and reach that next level, coupled with the defense at least holding their own, yeah, that's a recipe for the Dolphins to maybe potentially win this division here, and who knows what happens after that. But I think that those two things really need to happen. Tua needs to take a bigger step, and the defense needs to hold its own for the Dolphins to go anywhere.
So speaking of the Dolphins defense, Vic Fangio no longer calling the shots on that side of the ball. Instead, they brought in Anthony Weaver from the Baltimore Ravens. For the last couple of years, he's been on the Ravens staff. For the last 2 years specifically, he served as assistant head coach and defensive line coach. So this was like Harbaugh's right-hand man if he's the associate head coach. He wasn't a DC or an OC there, and yet he had that title. So he certainly was important to the defense there in Baltimore and has helped several players attain Pro Bowl seasons. I think there's a little bit of a mystery of how he is going to put his defense to use, like scheme-wise. There's some question marks there, but he could make things interesting, and teams aren't going to have tape on that early in the year. The Tua thing you mentioned, doing plays off schedule, I actually think they're going to double down on the motion that we saw from them last year. I think they're going to use that even more, which sounds ridiculous considering how often they used it last year, but if it works, why the fuck not? And if it keeps your quarterback healthy, who you really need to keep healthy after giving all that money, hell yeah, I'm going to keep doing it. So, they add in OBJ. You get him up and running before the snap as well. He could be a factor. And if you use like clear out packages with Waddle or with Tyreek Hill, he's a great intermediate route runner that could make big plays for you, not just in the regular season, but also in big games. And that's something you have that with Hill, but also you saw last year Hill kind of get dominated at times down the stretch because of the attention that Kansas City gave to him and some of those other teams too. I will say the O-line still is pretty shaky, and if there are any injuries to the defense, it's going to be really tough for this team to succeed early on. In your minds, like, do you think there's a steep drop off? Do you think they're about the same from where they were last year? Do you think there were any major upgrades? It kind of feels like running it back with more opportunities for certain players, namely Devon Achane.
Yeah, he'll be a big part of what they do, obviously, and how healthy he stays will be huge. But if I remember correctly, Raheem Mostert led the league in touchdowns last year. Like, it's not like they had a slouch of a running game without Achane. Now, don't get me wrong, Achane will reach a new level if he does stay healthy through the whole year that Mostert just wasn't capable of reaching last year. And he can unlock some things there in the running game to help out as well. But this team's got a lot of name brand talent. They've got a lot of actual talent on their team. I don't think that they got that much better in the off season, or at least I don't think that they got that much better compared to what they look like in the first half of last year. Phillips and Chubb and their health is a huge deal. Those are two dynamic players. And I have a tough time believing things are going to be better for the Dolphins this year, considering that. So, I mean, I don't know. I've got them in the 10-11 win range, similar to Buffalo. I probably have Buffalo like a game better than them. And I think it'll be a similar story to last year, where Miami gets off to the hot start and they can't get enough wins in the second half of the year. And as the weather gets colder, the Bills heat up, and that will be kind of how things play out. So I have their ceiling and their floor pretty close together, because I think there's too much talent on this team for it to be just flat out bad. So I guess their ceiling would be like 8-9 or 9-8 for me, and then that'd be their floor, and then their ceiling would be, I guess, like 11 wins with a division title. I do think it's possible. I just think it's probably more likely you're looking at maybe another wild card team or something like that at like 10 wins.
So looking at Miami's schedule, some nuances here. In my mind, their biggest games, Buffalo early in the season at home on Thursday Night Football. And then we pretty much flash all the way forward to the cold weather months. Thursday Night Football on the road in Green Bay, November 28th. Is
Loss.
That Thanksgiving?
Loss.
Is that Thanksgiving? The 28th?
It could be. You might want to double check that.
It is.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they're playing on Thanksgiving in Green Bay. How about that for prime time?
That's a loss.
Yeah, I think
that's a good
so
one,
too.
but that's a loss.
December 15th on the road at Houston. That to me could go 50-50 because they're playing in a dome.
Yeah, that could go their way. Yeah, okay.
And then about a week later, at home against San Francisco. I think they had that exact same matchup in Miami last year, right?
Could have been. I can't recall, to be honest with you. But San Francisco is going to be tough no matter where you get them, home or away.
And then the last game I had on here was December 29th on the road in Cleveland on Sunday Night Football in the dog pound. I think that's a tough game at the end of the year to have.
Loss, man. The howling winds in the cold of Cleveland, no way.
And then they finished the year on the road against the Jets. I feel like, so here's their last 6 weeks of the season. At Green Bay, versus New York, at Houston, versus San Francisco, at Cleveland, at New York. It's not a gauntlet by any means, but there's a few trap games on there. Like, you could easily see them losing all of Green Bay, Houston, Cleveland, and San Francisco. And then if they go 50-50 against the Jets, that's another pretty bad stretch to end the year. So they're going to have to figure out a way to avoid that this season. I do kind of agree with your ceiling floor. I had them a little bit higher on both, though.
Fair enough.
Were you going to add in anything schedule-wise? I kind of stepped over you there.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and sorry if I was interrupting you on my end. I just think, if those cold weather games in the back half of the year, like, I don't think Cleveland's going to be a juggernaut this year by any means, but it is incredibly difficult to play there. Cleveland is going to be cold in late December. It's going to be super windy. That is just not Tua's recipe for success. It's good that you have a home game against San Francisco, but San Francisco is just a tough team to beat, obviously. So it's not going to be easy there. Maybe they can steal that game against Houston being in a dome, but with you laying out that back half of the schedule, I feel even more confident in my prediction that they're going to start off hot and they're going to wither.
Well, the real question here is if they can have a better record than the Bills over the course of the season. The Jets, we'll get to in a bit, but by and large, it's been these two teams competing for the top of the division since Tom Brady left for Tampa Bay. I have their ceiling at 13-4, and that might sound crazy, but
wow.
I feel that's ceiling. That's like if everything goes well, okay? If Tua's an MVP caliber player, if Devon Achane steps in and turns into one of the best running backs in the league as well, and then you add him to Raheem Mostert's complement, Tyreek Hill is healthier for a full year and comes close to breaking records again. Their defense is the big question mark, but if they can just outscore everybody, it's a dumb argument. We made it last year at one point, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility either. And I think there is a case where they are the best team in the division. I think, weirdly, I feel like the Jets actually have a better chance at besting them this year than Buffalo if everything goes right, just because New York's full team has a little bit more to it than Buffalo's does. But again, we'll get there. I'm not fully set on that. However, I do kind of feel like they're going to win this division. I have them kind of around the 11 win mark, maybe 12 if it all goes well. is pretty much where they were at last year. Their over under is 9.5. If they make it to 11-6 again this year, and considering their slump at the end of last year, 11-6 isn't bad. 11-6, I feel like, is a pretty reliable number to go with here. It's only one game ahead of my prediction for Buffalo, but one game is all you need in this world. And anything more than that, I think, would be pretty impressive considering some of the challenges that could be ahead for this team at different points. I think their floor, though, is 10-7, runner-up in the AFC East and a wild card exit. I don't see them being a losing team. I don't even really see them as 9-8. I do think their offense is explosive enough to outscore the teams they need to. It's going to be the big games against teams like Seattle on the road in September or Green Bay on the road at Thanksgiving, like we talked about. Other than that, there's kind of a gap in the early and middle part of their schedule where they don't have that many tough games. So I really think 11-12 wins is very possible for this Miami team, and maybe 13 if it all goes well.
It's possible. I'll stick with 10-7 for Miami. So I think that we have flip-flopped records. I have 11-6 for the Bills, 10-7 for the Dolphins. I tend to agree. I think that there's just a little bit too much talent for this team to miss the playoffs, barring major injuries. So I'll stay 10-7, wild card exit like last time, and runner up to the Bills.
Okay. I dig it. We got a little disagreement with both our teams so far. Moving on to our next team, the New York Jets. Jets, Jets. I've done that on multiple episodes now. I hate myself. Over under for this year, 9.5, 7-10 in 2023. The third team in the AFC East lost Aaron Rodgers on the first drive of 2023. Their defense, though, was electric. Okay, Sauce Gardner. The Q in the middle of the defense as well. 7 wins for this team. If you just looked at their quarterback, you'd be surprised. I mean, how did they get to 7 wins? They beat Kansas City. They beat Buffalo. They had a couple other crazy wins, too. I trash Robert Saleh a lot, but I went back and looked at it. He did kind of a good job with this group. Getting to 7 wins last year with this team was impressive. And yes, they do have one of the best defenses in the league and some serious talent in Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, but there's a lot of hope right now with the New York Jets. There's a lot of expectations, and there's some chatter that if Aaron Rodgers can even be 75-80% of what he was at one point, that this team could really contend for the division. I don't know how confident I am in the health or the ability of Rodgers at this point, but that is definitely something we're going to talk about a lot with this team. Paul, looking at the losses of this team personnel-wise from 2023, Bryce Huff is the big name here, right? I mean, you could talk about Zach Wilson. Really, I think losing him is an improvement on the team more than anything, but that trade with
Huff, I wasn't going to say that's that big of a deal.
No, not at all. The trade with Huff really seems like the biggest acquisition for this team, unless you want to argue that it is Zach Wilson moving away and Rodgers stepping back into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take the low-hanging fruit there. I mean, I'll look at the Aaron Rodgers thing as the biggest transaction. I know that they did it a year prior, but I mean, you didn't really get to reap the rewards of it. I mean, that's the difference here. That's what Aaron Rodgers are we getting? I think that'll dictate what New York Jets team do we get. Do we get somebody who resembles more like MVP in his late 30s, Aaron Rodgers, or do we see the guy that we saw at the end of Green Bay there? And I just have a tough time believing that it's going to be MVP type Aaron Rodgers. I think that this team will probably be good enough to hang around for the first, 12 to 13 weeks. But honestly, I think that they'll lose a game or two down the stretch that maybe they shouldn't. Rodgers won't play that well. And you'll have them at I want to say, 7-8 through 15 weeks, and Rodgers will come up with some phantom injury or some reason why he can't finish the season when they're not technically eliminated, but by all means and purposes, they are basically. Their ceiling, I mean, they have the potential to win the division if Aaron Rodgers is good Aaron Rodgers. So I think that that's their ceiling. I'm not going to say that this team can make a super deep playoff run or, go to the Super Bowl or anything. But I think that potentially winning the division is the absolute ceiling if everything goes right. But their floor for me is 7 wins and the exact same record that they had last year. And wouldn't be too surprised if it happens again. I think people are overestimating. First of all, I don't think Rodgers cares that much anymore. I don't think he's that invested from what I hear. He's skipping, mandatory mini camp and things like that. I just don't think he's taking the season too seriously anymore. So I don't know if he's going to be the improvement that a lot of Jets fans are hoping for. And because of that, I think that they will be closer to their floor. I don't think that the Jets have a winning record this year. I don't.
Okay. Wow. All right. This feels like kind of the first hot take that we've ran into so far, because I have them with a winning record. I mean, I just looked solely at who their backup is going to be, Tyrod Taylor. That's a vast improvement as well. Like, God forbid Rodgers gets hurt again, right? We've seen Tyrod lead teams in the playoffs before. He hasn't won there, but the supporting cast here is pretty great. You brought in Mike Williams. There's injury concerns with him too, which we obviously have to mention. Hassan Reddick, who's kind of in a contract thing right now, but you also brought in Javon Kinlaw on the defensive line, Tyron Smith, and Morgan Moses on the O-line. Smith is going to step in and be the best offensive tackle. Smith is going to step in and be the best offensive tackle on the team right away. You also brought in John Simpson, Olu Fashanu, a rookie from Penn State who could end up blossoming into a starting tackle as well, and a really good one at that. And then you brought in Jordan Travis, a project quarterback from Florida State, future Jordan Love-esque type player in New York, maybe. I don't know. And of course, Malachi Corley, the speed demon out of Western Kentucky, could be making some plays for this team as well. The biggest question, obviously, is Aaron Rodgers. It has to be. And I do agree with most of what you say about him, but at the same time, I think that if you get 60% of Aaron Rodgers, it's probably still better than Zach Wilson. And they only need to win 2 more games than they won last year to eclipse that 500 mark. They had some fluky wins last year, so you could take a few of those away if you want. They have some pretty tough games here too. They start the year on the road in San Fran. They have to obviously play Buffalo and Miami twice each. They play Houston at home on Thursday Night Football on Halloween. That could be a pretty crazy atmosphere. Otherwise, though, it's kind of manageable. Like, I don't think it's impossible that the Jets could stumble into a winning record, even if Rodgers isn't playing his greatest. I love Breece Hall there. I think he's going to be the bell cow. I think he's going to get a ton more opportunities this year because they're going to have more of an ability to pass the ball. Maybe Breece Hall actually gets some touches inside the 5 as well, hopefully. However, I don't know if I can fully buy in. I think their season ceiling is probably like 11-6 AFC East champions. If there are real problems in Buffalo and Miami, I think there is kind of a contingency there where you have to have things going poorly elsewhere and things go really well in their building. And I'm of the belief with you too that even if they were to do that, I don't really see them making a deep playoff run. I could see them making the playoffs and falling out. If they make it in as a wild card team, I feel even more strongly about that. Like, I went through it and I tried to think about potential wild card teams from other divisions that they could maybe beat. And it wasn't the longest list. However, again, I don't think it's impossible. I think there is a world where they could make it to a conference championship, but I don't. My confidence meter for that, I put the Bills at 25%. I put theirs at maybe like 5 or 10. And ultimately, if Rodgers plays like an MVP and the supporting cast is what it was last year, they're going to be a damn good team. I just don't necessarily think that both those will happen. So my prediction for them is 9-8. I think they'll be a fringe, really frisky wild card team that has some warts with it. You know, I think Rodgers will probably be checked out at times, but they're going to be better and they're going to beat some good teams too. Like, make no mistake, the Jets have a good football team this year and could have one of the most elite defensive lines in football. They could have one of the most elite defenses in general in football. So I'm not going to totally overlook them. I feel like I'm being pretty fair with my prediction for them. However, having 3 teams in the AFC East with winning records does make things kind of complicated for the rest of the league on my end. Would you put them as 8-9 or 7-10?
I'll put them at 8-9 officially. I will say, all right, they'll get at least a game better than they were last year with the quarterback play that they had. But I'm not going to give them a winning record. I just don't know how invested Aaron Rodgers will be, and I think I mean, hey, with that Green Bay Packers team that he had his last year in Green Bay, they went 8-9. So I think that Packers team that we saw 2 years ago, that is what the Jets will look like this year. So I'll go 8-9 there.
I don't hate that prediction. My goal for them this year was make the playoffs. Doesn't matter how, figure the rest out later. I feel like if you go 0-2 with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and making the playoffs, even if year 1 was an injury season, it's not very foreboding for year 3. I feel like this is kind of the best chance they're going to have to capitalize now. We don't know what we'll see next year or if we'll see anything. Rodgers could retire in the offseason if he picks up another injury or things don't go well. Anything else you want to hit on for the Jets?
No, we covered it pretty well. I do agree with what you said about Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall, I think by the end of this year, as crazy as this is to say, and I know that there are some diehard Christian McCaffrey fans out there, and look, I love the guy as well, but I think that there's a very real chance that by the end of the 2024 season, we are saying Breece Hall is the best running back in the NFL, undisputed.
100%. I think out of all the running backs in the league right now, he certainly makes one of, if not the best case to do that. Moving on to my New England Patriots. This could be really exciting or really dark, or maybe a little bit of both. Paul, I am going to try to get as much of your outside perspective on this team as possible while still giving you some insight. Patriots fans, we all know how bad last year was. Worst season in Foxborough in 24 years, but really you have to go back to 1992, I think it was, to find the last year in which the Pats lost less or won less than 5 games in a season. That's 30 years worth of football, man. I haven't been alive that long. So this was indeed a historically bad season for the Patriots. There's an entirely new coaching staff in front office now. And even despite the team sucking last year, the defense was top 10 in the league without Christian Gonzalez and Matt Judon. But dreadful quarterback play and historically bad special teams, most notably the kicking game, cost this team several wins. Like 3 to 5 wins, which right away, if you look at it, that goes from a 4-win team to a 7 to maybe 9-win team. They would have been a fringe wildcard team if some areas of the team last year were just average instead of terrible. Mac Jones, gone. Matthew Slater, retired. Lawrence Guy, gone. Adrian Phillips, gone. J.C. Jackson, gone. Devontae Parker, Mac Wilson, Mike Gesicki, Jalen Mills, Trent Brown, gone. Miles Bryant, gone. And now there's a lot of rookies here. Jacoby Brissett, Drake May battling it out for the number 1 quarterback job right now. Lots of new receivers in the building. KJ Osborne, as well as rookies Jalen Polk, Javon Baker. Austin Hooper could be a contributor there as a number 2 tight end. Alex Van Pelt, the current offensive coordinator for the Patriots, has been the OC for Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland the last handful of years. He hasn't called plays, but they utilized a lot of 2 tight end kind of power, muscle, ground and pound formations there. And there's been some talks that Hooper could be as productive, if not more so, than Hunter Henry this year. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's something that's been mentioned. I love the draft for the Patriots. I wish that there was more of a coaching search, but I understand that this job was essentially handed down to Gerard Mayo from Bill Belichick, and I'm okay with that in retrospect. And I do feel relatively okay about what the Patriots could be this year, provided the defense is as good, if not better, as it was last season. This team somehow beat your Pittsburgh Steelers in the regular season last year, Paul. Sorry to bring up that game.
Mitch Trubisky is how, but continue.
Agreed. Yeah, Mitch Trubisky is how. Zeke Elliott also had a great game in that one as well. He was certainly the player of the game. But I'm not talking about that game specifically, just in general. The fall from grace from the New England Patriots, and now sort of this new clean slate, ushers in an entirely new era. They sort of half did it when Brady left the team a few years ago. Now they're really doing it sort of for real with Belichick leaving. I think there's still going to be some remnants of things he did with the team, at least scheme wise, defensively. Otherwise, this could be an entirely new look, new feel organization. For you, as an outsider, is it really all on the shoulders of Drake May, or is there another potential path to success for the Patriots? Let's not necessarily say this year, but in the near future.
If we're talking, years to come or even near future, like you say, I mean,
like within the next 5 years.
Yeah, like it's on the shoulders of Drake May, for sure. But I don't think that should be the attitude coming into this year, nor will it. I don't think Drake May will be the starter week 1, and I know a lot of people on social media have heard rumblings of that and are like, "Oh, Drake May is going to be a bust because Brissett's going to start over him." Like, no, I mean it's fine. This team is not good. There's not a lot of talent around him, and I don't know that you want to throw a rookie quarterback right into the fire right away. I think it could just delay the development and prevent growth. Let's have Brissett in there. Let May learn a little bit, and go from there. I don't think that this year is going to be focused on. I mean, you're going to try to win football games, obviously, but let's be real. The New England Patriots aren't going anywhere this year, and you want to develop your young quarterback in Drake May. What I think that their biggest goal should be is just that. I think that you should have a plan in place to get May up to speed and get him in there midway through the year. I don't know where your bye week falls, but that always seems to be a good time to throw a quarterback in there. You have an extra week to prepare for the upcoming team. And that could potentially be a time when you want to throw May in there.
That's week 14.
Okay. So you might need to get him in before that.
Yeah.
But the point, maybe there's a long week in there as well. I got the week following a Thursday night game or something like that you could thrust him in there, something of that regard. Get him in there, and just you want to see him get better week to week and learn from things. And if he's doing that, and if May comes in week 10, let's say, and by week 18 he is a noticeably better quarterback, then you take that as a huge win, no matter how many actual wins you had on the season. I think that should be the Patriots' goal. I think that is. I think that they're going about it the right way right now. I just don't think that there's a lot of talent on this team on the offensive side of the ball for them to do anything or rack up any sort of meaningful number of wins. That's my outsider perspective on it. And we'll see. I mean, Gerard Mayo is an unproven coach as well. Like, you can learn from Belichick all you want, but like when you're actually in the pilot seat, it's a whole different ballgame. So those are the big question marks. Those are the goals. That's my outsider opinion.
Starting with Drake May, since you said that's who the most weight is on, I don't disagree with you. I think it's a combination of him and Mayo, but I think Mayo is doing everything he can to relieve some of that pressure from Drake May, whether it is by sort of phasing him into the offense or making it an uphill battle to actually win that job, so that if he does, he really has to earn it and earn that playing time. I look at the Giants the last handful of years with not being able to keep Daniel Jones healthy. I look at the Guardians drafting Sam Howell and how bad that turned out, particularly because of how bad the O-line play was and just getting the coaching search wrong. There's other examples I could bring up too. How many quarterbacks missed? Most of them. But in the case of the Patriots, I think that you're right. You got to play it safe. I don't think you can be too conservative. I do think that you need to give fans in Foxborough at least some hope that there's something there you're working with. And to me, that's just seeing who Drake May, Jalen Polk, and Christian Gonzalez, are as players. What can those young guys amount to? Can we get a full healthy season from all of them, or somewhat close to it for 2 of the 3? And what will that result in record-wise? The offense, I think, could be really different. I'm actually kind of excited for the, let's say, competition in the wide receiver room. I think this is one of the few situations in the NFL where, despite there not being a clear-cut wide receiver one, the fact that there isn't is good for the competition of the group as a whole. KJ Osborne was kind of okay in Minnesota last year. He wasn't great, but he was a decent wide receiver 3. Jalen Polk has shown flashes of being phenomenal in camp, and people have rave reviews about who he is just as a guy. Not to mention the explosiveness and route running of Baker, the other rookie I mentioned. There's Kendrick Bourne, Pop Douglas, Tyquan Thornton, Ramondre Stevenson, who just got an extension. They brought in Antonio Gibson as well. Juju Smith-Schuster kind of feels like the odd man out right now, but if they cut him, it's going to be like a $9 million dead cap hit. So I don't really know what their plan is for that. Maybe they try to trade him and, just get rid of him, but I don't know how many teams would really want him at this point. I don't see the Pats as a playoff team this year. I'm not going to get out of my gourd here and predict something crazy, despite them being my favorite team. My hope is for this team to play well enough to play out of the top 5 pick range, but still be within the top 10. Like, show flashes where you can be a competitive team, that you are a better group than you were last year. But ultimately, there's still a lot more development left, and there's some pretty good prospects in the draft next year that aren't quarterbacks that you could draft to continue building this roster. Still a lot of cap space for this team as well. Maybe go out and get a Brandon Aiyuk or, somebody else who can really contribute on either side of the ball. Spend a little bit of money. Don't be afraid to. If Drake May proves he's a guy, I think free agents will be more willing to come to Foxborough and, try to make this team capable of being a dynasty again. I don't think that's realistic to expect anytime in the next 5 to 10 years, specifically because of how good some of the other quarterbacks are in the AFC. Like, let's be real. If Drake May is going to lead this team to a Super Bowl anytime soon, he's got to be better than Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa. Shall I go on? I don't think it's impossible. I think that May is going to show flashes of Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, maybe a little bit of something else too at times. Like, I don't really know, but I'm excited. I haven't felt excited about watching this team since we drafted Mac Jones. I didn't like the move when it happened. I hate the move now. And him leaving town is awesome. Like, if this team is just average at quarterback and special teams next year, they'll be far better. I have us. I have the New England Patriots at a ceiling of 7 and 10. They have a brutal schedule. If they make it to 7 wins, this will mean that May is a superstar. They found a number 1 wide receiver, and everything else went right. Realistically, I think it's more like a 5-win, 6-win team. I'll give them 6 wins. The floor, I think, is like 3-14, worst team in the league. But I think that would be after sitting Drake May for the first 7 weeks of the season, where you sort of mentioned the plan of bringing him in after a Thursday night game or something like that, where you have that extra 3 days to work with prep wise. The only real time they have to do that on the schedule is between a game on the road against the Jets and on the road against the San Francisco 49ers. Call me crazy. I don't want Drake May debuting against San Francisco.
I agree. That's a tough one to get thrown into. Yeah.
However, after week 6, so their first 6 games are Cincinnati, Seattle, New York, San Francisco, Miami, and Houston. All 6 of those teams could be playoff teams this year. The next stretch of games, Jacksonville, New York, Tennessee, Chicago. So those 4 gets a little bit easier. Then you get some tests in Los Angeles, Miami, Indianapolis. You finish the year with Arizona, Buffalo, LA, Buffalo. So personally, I think if Drake May doesn't start for most of the year, it is a sign that I think there's going to be a point where if Drake May is not starting games, it's not a good thing. Like, I want him starting by at least week 7. If it's earlier, that's great. If it's later, I don't know how I feel about it. There's a lot of different ways this season could go, but that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. I think 6 wins. I think they're better than people think, because teams love hating the Patriots and want them to be terrible forever. But I think 4.5 wins is 1 win too low. I could see 6 wins. It would impress me if we got there. I'm hopeful, but I'm trying to measure my expectations,
I think they're pretty fair, and I have a pretty similar ceiling and floor. I think 7 wins is the absolute most I could potentially see, and then worst team in the league is your floor. But that's how it is. I guess with some of the guys you have there right now. I was thinking about giving them a 6-11 record myself, but I'll go 5-12 just so I'm a little bit different than you. I think it'll
that's a
settle in that range. Yeah.
better kind of number though. Like I have slightly wishful thinking going 6-11, admittedly.
Yeah. So I think that that's pretty fair. And yeah, they'll be the bottom dweller, but you made a fair point. Like if Drake May isn't getting the call somewhere in the middle of the season to take over, it means one of three things. The first one is the most unrealistic, and that's that Jacoby Brissett is balling and you guys are competing and winning games just with Brissett. That I find to be the most unrealistic thing. That's one. Number two is that Drake May got hurt somewhere along the road in, preseason or something like that, and he's not able to go. That's bad, but not the worst case. Number three is that he's just so bad in practice, can't pick things up, that he's not even ready. That's your most dreadful situation. I don't think either of those things will happen. I think he'll stay healthy, not, playing in real games, and that he'll be ready to go sometime week 7 or 8, and there'll be a learning curve, but I think he'll get at least marginally better as the season goes on. And that's the most important thing for you guys.
I will say, for a team who had, one of the best players at its position for, a long time, won multiple Super Bowls with this guy. We all know him for his big plays. They still haven't been able to replace Adam Vinatieri or Steven Gostkowski. It's not where you thought I was going with that. Chad Ryland, the kicker last year, was terrible. They need a better kicker. I don't want to see us lose games because guys can't make extra points or 25-yard field goals anymore. That was pretty brutal. I
thought you said they were trying to do that on purpose.
They were. I think they were. But if you spent a 4th-round draft pick on drafting a kicker so you could intentionally lose some games, that's a little bit of a waste of resources, don't you think? Like, there's better ways you can do that. Somebody just, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's besides the point. I was trying to make a joke, but
it was received.
It was received. I said when Vinatieri and Gostkowski came out of my mouth, the blank stare on your face was like, all right, I gotta wrap this up. Before we move on from this division, I think you picked the Bills and I picked the Dolphins as our winners. Try to sway me from your side. Try to sway me to your side from mine. Tell me why I should be believing in the Bills rather than the Dolphins. Is it purely the quarterback? Because if that's your only argument, I feel like there are other spots you need to look at too.
It's the only argument I feel that I've ever needed. I think that also if people are worried about the departure of Stephon Diggs is pretty much non-existent down the stretch for the Bills. It kind of goes hand in hand with them using a more run-first offense. I think that they'll have that mentality. Subtraction. Yeah, I think that they'll have that mentality throughout the course of this whole season, and because of that, I think that they'll look more like the team over the last month of the 2023 season than they did in the first half of last year. That's my argument there, coupled with the fact that Josh Allen is Josh Allen.
Okay. Give me your biggest bold prediction for the division.
I think
could be team-wise or per player.
Yeah, I think that it'll probably go back to the Jets, and I already said it really. I think that the Jets still finish with a losing record, and that Aaron Rodgers, and I don't know how bold this is per se, because it is in the realm of possibility, but I think Aaron Rodgers looks extremely underwhelming and looks kind of bad, if anything, out there. I think that he'll definitely resemble that 2022 Green Bay self. And my other thing is I don't think he'll finish the season, and I don't know if it will completely be injury related. I think it could be an attitude thing there as well.
Okay. Wow. All right. For my bold prediction, I'm going to prophesize here that I think Tyreek Hill gets it done this year. I think he breaks the receiving yards record. I think he topples over Calvin Johnson. I think he flirts with the 2,000-yard mark. I don't know if he quite gets it. I think there's a solid chance he could break the receptions record as well. It might not be a bold prediction. It might just be a pretty standard prediction for some, especially with that new game being tacked on. But if he can continue off his production last year, I think we could really see the peak of Tyreek Hill's career this year before he then eventually starts trailing off. But I think this is the year where he's going to have the best chance to do it, if I had to guess. Best fantasy value player.
You want me to go first or you?
I don't know. I really like the idea of Devon Achane. I think there is some value there, but he's been soaring up the ADP charts as well. Like, you don't see many drafts nowadays where he makes it out of the third round, I feel like. So I think people are kind of cluing in on him. I don't know if it's valued so much now as an expectation for him to take a leap. So if I had to go with anybody else, I would say Jalen Waddle. God forbid something does happen to Tyreek Hill where he gets hurt. Who's going to step into that role? It's going to be Waddle. And I think that he is more capable of achieving that than people think. I think even if Tyreek Hill doesn't have a year where he, flirts with the upper echelon of the receiving yards records and statistical seasons, I think that if that doesn't happen, it means that there's more of a focus on getting the Waddle the ball and taking a little bit of the load off Tyreek Hill. You saw a little bit of that with bringing in OBJ this year as well. Other guys, I sort of talked about them with the Bills earlier. Curtis Samuel and James Cook. Those would kind of be my top three. You mentioned Breece Hall, which I think is a great point. I didn't want to mention him because I do think there is extreme value with him. Malachi Corley, maybe for the Jets, the rookie from Western Kentucky. He's pretty low on the ADP charts, and if anything happens to Mike Williams, which, Murphy's Law, if it can, it will. We should name that Williams Law instead. Malachi Corley could have a pretty big year too. Give me your best fantasy value player for the AFC East, Paul.
It's Keon Coleman for me. This was a receiver that I absolutely loved coming out of Florida State, and I think that he's going to fit what Josh Allen and the Bills want to do perfectly. I did say that I think that there'll be a bigger emphasis on the run game, and I do believe that. But where's the competition for targets in this offense? Dalton Kincaid is the only guy I can think of, and I like Kincaid a lot at the tight end position. But at the end of the day, he is a tight end, and Keon Coleman, I think, can take over this top pass catching role. I'm not going to say that he's going to be Stephon Diggs 2.0 right off of the bat, but we talked about Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, no disrespect to those guys, but those guys aren't going to turn in fantasy one wide receiver performances. And I'm just looking here on Fantasy Pros, and Keon Coleman is ranked as the 11th rookie overall on their website. And then I think he's 125th or something. He's 125th in overall rankings. Now, again, this is according to fantasypros.com, so different sites are going to have different rankings. But that's such value there for a guy that can be the top receiver in his offense going that late. Love Keon Coleman. I like the interviews that I've seen from him too. I know that you can't take too much from that, but just some of the in-person interviews that he had with the Buffalo Bills where he's talking about golfing and everything. I think that it seems like a good guy.
He's got a Jameis Winston type of personality for sure.
It is a little Jameis Winston, but I think it's a little bit more serious than that. And
I don't think so. I don't think there's much.
It's not quite. I don't think it's quite Jameis level, but yeah. Dude likes to golf, which I respect as well. I think Keon Coleman's going to be a solid NFL player. I think he's going to fit what Buffalo does very well. I know that the Bills really were targeting him. They like him, and I think he'll develop into a solid. I'm not again for where I'm seeing him go in some mock drafts right now. I'm not expecting the world from him, but you can draft him late there. I said 125th overall ranking. That would put you in a 12-man league. That would put you at the beginning of or midway through the 11th round. I think that this guy can absolutely deliver a flex-worthy performance, top 30-ish fantasy wide receiver this year. So somebody probably more warranted of going in the 6th round-ish in a 12-man. That can be incredible value right there.
Okay. All right. I'm liking this. That, my friends, concludes our AFC East preview. Paul, we got one division down, 7 more to go. We're going to have our NFC East preview in a separate episode, but Paul and I are about to dive into it right now. So we hope you enjoyed our first episode. We got plenty more on the way for you here at Fifth and Long. If you want to hear about the NFC East, scroll on up, man. Listen to that next episode. And without further ado, we hope you've enjoyed. Fifth and Long fans, we'll see you later. Paul and I will catch you on the flip side right here at Fifth and Long as well. Commish, say goodbye to the people real quick.
God bless everyone.
Happy birthday, Paul, one more time.
Thank you, sir.